Copyright. First edition published by I2I Hype, LLC 2024. Copyright 2024 by Ivy Wilder. All rights reserved. No part of this publication may be reproduced, stored, or transmitted in any form by any means, electronic, mechanical, photocopying, recording, scanning, or otherwise without written permission from the publisher. It is illegal to copy this book, post it to a website, or distribute it by any other means without permission. This novel is entirely a work of fiction. The names, characters, and incidents portrayed in it are the work of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, events or localities is entirely coincidental. Wynn Valentine asserts the moral right to be identified as the author of this work. Designations used by companies to distinguish their products are often claimed as trademarks. All brand names and product names used in this book and on its cover are trade names, service marks, trademarks, and registered trademarks of their respective owners. The publishers in the book are not associated with any product or vendor mentioned in this book. None of the companies referenced within the book have endorsed the book. Book cover by Dana Sacco. Chapter 1, Tremors in the Twilight. Wraith Shadowmist glided through Cobweb Square, her ethereal form casting a faint blue glow on the bustling market stalls. Her luminous silver-blue eyes scanned the scene, taking in the flurry of activity as vendors prepared for the upcoming festival. Ghostly fingers brushed against her translucent fedora, adjusting it out of habit rather than necessity. The air was thick with the scent of spices and magic, a heady mixture that would have made a living person dizzy. Quite the spectacle, isn't it? A familiar voice piped up beside her. Pumpkin Spice materialized, his vibrant orange hair a stark contrast to Wraith's misty pallor. His cinnamon-colored freckles seemed to dance across his face as he grinned, eyes sparkling with excitement. Indeed. Wraith's voice echoed softly, carrying a hint of the jazz-age lilt she'd never quite lost. Though I can't shake the feeling something's amiss. Her form shimmered slightly, a subconscious reaction to her unease. Pumpkin's nose twitched, his keen senses on high alert. He inhaled deeply, sorting through the myriad scents of the square. You're not wrong. There's been talk of strange occurrences lately. Just yesterday, old Mrs. Hemlock swears her crystal ball started speaking in riddles. And not the usual cryptic nonsense, mind you, but full-on nursery rhymes mixed with quantum physics. Curious. Wraith's brow furrowed, the star-shaped mark on her temple glowing faintly. She absently reached out to touch a passing wisp of fog, her fingers leaving swirling patterns in the mist. A sudden tremor rocked Cobweb Square, sending trinkets clattering to the ground and eliciting startled cries from the crowd. Cauldrons toppled, spilling their contents across the cobblestones in a rainbow of magical concoctions. Wraith instinctively reached out to steady a wobbling cauldron, her spectral hand passing right through it. The frustration of her incorporeal state flashed across her face for a brief moment. Whoa! Pumpkin yelped, his form shimmering as he fought the urge to transform. His nails briefly elongated into claws before retracting. That's new. And not the good kind of new, like when Batty's Brew started serving those pumpkin spice lattes. Panic rippled through the square as confused whispers rose from the gathered supernatural beings. A group of witches huddled together, their pointed hats quivering. A vampire dropped his parasol, hissing as he darted for the shade of a nearby stall. Wraith raised her voice, an unusual occurrence that immediately caught everyone's attention, her words carrying a hint of otherworldly resonance. Remain calm, citizens of Shadowed Hallow. We'll get to the bottom of this. Her silvery eyes swept over the crowd, projecting a sense of authority that belied her spectral nature. Pumpkin nodded vigorously, his charm necklace jingling. The small jack-o'-lantern pendant glowed faintly, reacting to his heightened emotions. Yeah, what she said. No need to lose your heads, figuratively or literally. He flashed a grin, his slightly pointed canines gleaming. As the crowd settled, their murmurs dying down to a low hum, Wraith and Pumpkin exchanged worried glances. The air seemed to thicken around them, heavy with unspoken concerns. Before they could discuss further, the clicking of bone on cobblestone announced the arrival of Mayor Cornelius Crypt. The skeleton's polished skull gleamed in the perpetual twilight as he approached, his pinstripe suit impeccably pressed. "Ah, my dear detectives!" The skeleton's jaw clattered cheerfully, the sound reminiscent of castanets. "Just the duo I was looking for. We have a matter of utmost importance to discuss." His empty eye sockets somehow managed to convey a twinkle of excitement. "Mayor Crypt," Wraith acknowledged with a nod, her misty hair swirling around her face. "I assume this is about the tremor?" She raised an ethereal eyebrow, her form shimmering with curiosity. "Oh, that? Merely a hiccup, I'm sure." Cornelius waved a bony hand dismissively, the gesture accompanied by a faint rattling. "No, I wanted to inform you about our upcoming exchange program with Mary Hallow." His skull seemed to stretch into a grin, defying the laws of anatomy. Pumpkin's eyes widened, the amber flecks in his irises catching the light. "Mary Hallow? You mean the Christmas town? The place with all the tinsel and candy canes?" His tail, momentarily visible, wagged with excitement before disappearing again. "The very same." Cornelius beamed, or at least his skull approximated the expression. His jaw clicked rapidly as he spoke, barely containing his enthusiasm. "We'll be hosting some of their residents, and vice versa. A cultural exchange, if you will. Imagine it, elves wandering our foggy streets, while our own dear vampires frolic in their winter wonderland." Wraith's form shimmered with concern, her edges becoming slightly more diffuse. "Have you considered the security implications, Mayor? Our realms are quite different." She glanced meaningfully at a nearby stall selling questionable potions and cursed amulets. Before Cornelius could respond, a deafening screech filled the air, drowning out the ambient sounds of the market. The detectives whirled around, Pumpkin's hair standing on end, to see a massive swarm of bats erupting from nearby buildings. The creatures swirled around them in a dizzying aerial dance, their wings creating gusts that sent market stalls toppling. The leathery flap of countless wings mixed with the startled cries of shadowed Hollow's residents, creating a cacophony of chaos. As the swarm of bats continued their chaotic dance above Cobweb Square, a frantic ghost burst through the crowd, his translucent form flickering with distress. Wisps of ectoplasm trailed behind him like a spectral comet tail. He barreled straight through a startled vendor, sending spectral apples tumbling to the ground. The ghostly fruit bounced once before dissipating into mist. "Madam Hemlock!" The ghost wailed, his voice a haunting echo that reverberated through the square. "She's gone. Vanished into thin air." His form pulsed with each word, growing more transparent with his agitation. Wraith's eyes narrowed, the glow intensifying until they resembled twin blue stars. "Calm yourself," she commanded, her voice carrying a hint of its former authority. "What do you mean, vanished?" She reached out, her spectral hand passing through the ghost's shoulder in a gesture meant to be comforting. The ghost wrung his hands, wisps of ectoplasm trailing from his fingers like ethereal silly string. His form wavered, threatening to dissipate entirely. "I was delivering a package of rare herbs to her shop, you know, the really potent stuff she uses for her famous youth potions. The door was ajar, so I went in. The place was a mess, books scattered, potions spilled. There was even a cauldron still bubbling, but it was empty. And Madam Hemlock, nowhere to be found." Pumpkin's ears perked up, his nose twitching furiously as if trying to catch a scent from the ghost's story. His eyes gleamed with a predatory light, the detective in him coming to the fore. "Any sign of a struggle? Scorch marks from a spell gone wrong? The scent of brimstone or temporal displacement?" "And no," the ghost stammered, his voice fading in and out like a bad radio signal. Just emptiness. As if she'd been plucked right out of existence. Even her familiar, that mangy old cat, was gone. And you know how that thing never leaves the shop. Mayor Cripp's bones rattled with concern, the sound like distant wind chimes. Oh dear, oh dear. This is most troubling. Madame Hemlock is a pillar of our community. Without her, who will brew the potions for our annual transformation tango? Wraith turned to Pumpkin, her form shimmering with determination. The star-shaped mark on her temple pulsed with an inner light, matching the intensity in her eyes. We need to investigate immediately. Something tells me this is more than just a simple disappearance. Agreed, Pumpkin nodded, his charm necklace glinting in the perpetual twilight. He cracked his knuckles, a mischievous grin spreading across his face. But where do we start? Hemlock's shop? The last place she was seen? Or should we round up the usual suspects? That shifty goblin gang's been awfully quiet lately. As if in answer, the bats above suddenly changed direction, their collective movement as fluid as a single organism. They streamed towards the center of town, their wings cutting through the misty air. Their screeches formed an eerie chorus that sent chills through even the most hardened supernatural beings. Even the ghosts looked pale. The crooked spire, Wraith murmured, her gaze following the bat's trajectory. The clock tower loomed in the distance, its warped silhouette a familiar landmark against the twilight sky. As they watched, the hands of the clock began to spin wildly, moving backwards and forwards in defiance of time itself. Chapter 2: The Vanishing Witch. Wraith and Pumpkin raced towards the crooked spire, their forms blurring as they sped through the winding streets of shadowed Hallow. The clock tower loomed ahead, its warped silhouette a stark contrast against the perpetual twilight sky. As they approached Madame Hemlock's quarters, both detectives slowed, recalling the ghost's report of an ajar door. To their surprise, they found the entrance firmly shut and locked. Wraith's spectral brow furrowed, her ethereal form flickering with confusion. Pumpkin's vine-like whiskers twitched, his nose wrinkling as he sniffed the air around the door. This doesn't add up, Wraith murmured, her voice carrying a hint of static. The ghost said the door was open. Pumpkin nodded, his eyes narrowing. Something's not right here. Can you phase through and take a look? Without hesitation, Wraith glided through the solid wood, leaving Pumpkin alone in the hallway. After a moment's pause, the pumpkin-headed detective sighed, his shoulders sagging. Well, here goes nothing, he muttered, taking a step back. With a running start, he slammed his shoulder into the door. The wood splintered and gave way, sending Pumpkin tumbling into the room. As they entered Madame Hemlock's quarters, both detectives were immediately on high alert. The locked door contradicted their initial information, raising the possibility of magical tampering or misdirection. The scene that greeted them was one of utter chaos. Furniture lay overturned, drawers hung open with their contents spilled across the floor. Shattered potion bottles littered the ground, their contents mingling to create a swirling, iridescent puddle that hissed and bubbled ominously. Wraith floated towards the center of the room, her spectral form casting an eerie blue glow over the destruction. Her eyes were drawn to an empty pedestal, its surface covered in a fine layer of glittering dust. The pumpkin tome, she gasped, her voice barely above a whisper. It's gone. Pumpkin's eyes widened, the flame within flickering with concern. He moved carefully through the debris, his nose twitching furiously as he tried to catch a scent. Suddenly, he froze, his entire body tensing. Wraith, he called, his voice low and urgent. I smell something off. It's faint, but definitely not from around here. Some kind of magic I've never encountered before. Wraith drifted towards the window, her ethereal form casting a faint glow on the glass. As she approached, her eyes narrowed, focusing on a thin, jagged line that ran across the pane. Pumpkin, come look at this, she called, her voice tinged with concern. Pumpkin carefully picked his way through the debris, joining Wraith at the window. As he peered through the crack, his eyes widened in disbelief. Beyond the glass, swirling mist churned and twisted, revealing glimpses of a world beyond their own. Flashes of color and strange, unfamiliar shapes danced in the ethereal fog, hinting at realms unknown to the inhabitants of shadowed Hallow. "What in the name of All Hallows' Eve is that?" Pumpkin whispered, his flame flickering with a mix of awe and trepidation. Before Wraith could respond, something caught her eye. A piece of parchment, tucked into the corner of the window frame, fluttered in a non-existent breeze. She plucked it from its hiding place, unfolding it carefully. "It's a note," she murmured, her brow furrowing as she read aloud. "In glass we dwell, a world apart. Our barrier thin, like gossamer art. When stars align and shadows dance, the veil will tear, a cosmic chance. Beware the cracks, for they may spread and shatter the life we've always led." Pumpkin's eyes narrowed as he processed the cryptic message. Is that talking about us? About shadowed Hallow?" Before Wraith could answer, the floor beneath them began to tremble. The tremor grew stronger, more violent than the one they'd experienced earlier. Books tumbled from shelves, and the remaining intact potion bottles clinked dangerously against each other. As the detectives struggled to maintain their balance, a high-pitched screech filled the air. Through the cracked window, a dark cloud poured into the room. Bats, hundreds of them, streamed through the opening, their wings creating a deafening cacophony of flaps and squeaks. The creatures swirled around Wraith and Pumpkin, forming a living tornado of fur and leather. The detectives found themselves at the center of a frenzied whirlwind, unable to see beyond the wall of swirling bodies. Chapter 3, Whispers in the Dark. As the bat swarm finally dissipated, Wraith and Pumpkin exchanged a worried glance. They knew they needed more information, and fast. "The cackling cauldron," Wraith said, her voice barely above a whisper. "If anyone's heard anything, it'll be there." Pumpkin nodded, his flame flickering with determination. They made their way through the winding streets of shadowed Hallow, the air thick with tension and the scent of magic gone awry. The cackling cauldron bustled with activity, its patrons a motley crew of supernatural beings. As they entered, Wraith spotted a familiar face at the bar, Jack-o'-lantern, his carved grin looking more forced than usual. "Jack," Pumpkin called out, approaching the enchanted pumpkin. "We need to talk." Wraith leaned in, her voice low. "Word is, you and Madam Hemlock had a bit of a disagreement recently. Care to elaborate?" Jack's flame flickered nervously. He glanced around before speaking. "Look, it wasn't anything major. Just a difference of opinion about the barriers." "Barriers?" Pumpkin pressed, his curiosity piqued. Jack sighed, his carved features twisting into a grimace. "There's been talk, you know? Whispers about a group that wants to shatter the veil. Break down the walls between worlds. Madam Hemlock thought they were just rumors, but I'm not so sure." Wraith and Pumpkin exchanged a worried glance. This aligned all too well with the cryptic note they'd found. As they pondered this new information, a quiet voice spoke up behind them. "Perhaps I can shed some light on the matter." They turned to find Widow Webbs, her multiple arms clutching a stack of ancient tomes. The Spider-Woman's eyes gleamed with barely concealed concern. "There have been unusual requests at the library lately," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Books on barrier magic, interdimensional travel, even some obscure texts on the nature of our reality." Pumpkin leaned in, his flame flickering with intensity. "Who's been making these requests?" Widow Webbs shook her head. "I'm not certain. They always come through intermediaries, never directly. But the frequency and specificity of the requests, it's troubling." Wraith and Pumpkin exchanged a meaningful look. They needed to speak with Mayor Crypt about this exchange program. As if summoned by their thoughts, Mayor Cornelius Crypt bustled into the cackling cauldron, his bony frame rattling with each step. His perpetual grin seemed strained as he approached the bar. "Mayor," Wraith called out, her ethereal form gliding towards him. "We need to discuss the exchange program." Crypt's skeletal fingers twitched nervously. Yes, well, what would you like to know?" Pumpkin's flame flickered suspiciously. "What's the true purpose behind this program? It seems awfully convenient timing." The mayor's eye sockets darted left and right. True purpose? Why, cultural exchange, of course. Nothing more, nothing less. Wraith pressed further. And the recent disturbances? The tremors? Mere coincidence, I'm sure, Crypt stammered, his bones clacking together. "Now, if you'll excuse me." Before they could question him further, a cauldron of bats burst through an open window, swooping through the pub in a frenzied dance. Patrons ducked and shrieked as the creatures swirled overhead. As the bats dissipated, Wraith and Pumpkin turned back to the mayor, but he had vanished in the chaos. They moved on, questioning other patrons. With each interview, the bat interruptions grew more frequent and intense. By the time they spoke with a nervous ghoul, the cauldron of bats had swelled to a small army, their wings beating a thunderous rhythm. As the latest swarm subsided, Wraith's keen hearing picked up a hushed conversation from a shadowy corner. "The Twilight cult believes breaking the snow globe will grant immense power," a hooded figure whispered. Pumpkin's flame sputtered in shock. "Did you hear that?" he hissed to Wraith. She nodded grimly. The pieces were starting to fall into place, and the picture they formed was deeply troubling. Chapter 4: The Midnight Masquerade. Wraith and Pumpkin exchanged a knowing look. The Midnight Masquerade offered the perfect opportunity to gather more information without arousing suspicion. As night fell, they donned their disguises. Wraith wrapped herself in shimmering fabric that made her ethereal form appear solid, while Pumpkin's flame flickered behind an intricate mask of autumn leaves. The grand ballroom of Shadowed Hollow's town hall buzzed with activity. Supernatural beings of all kinds twirled and mingled, their true identities concealed behind elaborate masks and costumes. Wraith glided through the crowd, her keen ears picking up snippets of conversation. Tremors getting worse. Madame Hemlock's disappearance. Exchange program, but why now? Pumpkin, meanwhile, wove between partygoers, his enhanced senses on high alert. Suddenly, a familiar scent tickled his nose. It was faint, barely perceptible beneath the cacophony of perfumes and potions, but unmistakable, the same strange magic they detected in Hemlock's tower. He caught Wraith's eye across the room and tapped his nose meaningfully. She nodded, understanding his silent message. As Wraith continued her circuit of the room, something caught her eye. A vampire in an ornate bat costume wore an oddly shaped brooch at his throat. She might have dismissed it as part of his outfit, but then she spotted another, a witch, her mask adorned with crow feathers, wore an identical piece. Her suspicion aroused, Wraith began to scan the crowd more intently. There, a werewolf in a silver-trimmed suit. And there, a ghost, her translucent form draped in gossamer. Both wore the same brooch. She sidled up to Pumpkin, keeping her voice low. "The brooches. Several guests are wearing identical ones. Oddly shaped, like a piece of a puzzle," Pumpkin finished, his flame flickering with excitement behind his mask. Wraith and Pumpkin exchanged a meaningful glance, their suspicions growing. They split up, weaving through the costumed crowd to gather more information. As Wraith drifted past a shadowy alcove, she overheard hushed voices. Two figures, their faces obscured by elaborate masks, huddled close together. "The pumpkin tome is secure," one whispered. "But we need the final piece before the next tremor." "And the witch?" the other asked. "Contained." She won't interfere. Wraith's form shimmered with barely contained excitement. She needed to find Pumpkin. Before she could move, a hush fell over the ballroom. On a raised dais, a magician in a starry cloak began an elaborate performance. Swirls of light danced from his fingertips, coalescing into shimmering constellations. Suddenly, the magic pulsed, growing stronger than intended. The illusory stars expanded, pushing against the very fabric of reality. For a heart-stopping moment, the edge of their snow globe world flickered into view, a curved, glassy barrier separating them from swirling darkness beyond. Gasps of shock rippled through the crowd. The magician frantically waved his hands, dispelling the illusion. But the damage was done. In the chaos that followed, Wraith caught sight of a cloaked figure slipping out a side door. The same brooch glinted at their throat. "Pumpkin," she called, her voice carrying an otherworldly echo. "This way." They gave chase, following the figure through winding corridors and out into the misty night. The pursuit led them to the edge of the Whisper Stream, where the suspect vanished into the shadows of a weeping willow. Pumpkin's flame sputtered as he caught his breath. "Lost them," he growled. But Wraith's eyes narrowed, focusing on something carved into the tree's trunk. "Look," she said, pointing to a series of arcane symbols. Pumpkin leaned closer, his fiery glow illuminating the message. "It's a ritual," he breathed. "To break the barrier between worlds." Before they could discuss further, a familiar sound filled the air. The beating of countless wings grew to a deafening roar as a massive cauldron of bats descended upon the masquerade. Guests screamed and scattered, their elaborate costumes fluttering in the chaos. The dark swarm blotted out the ethereal moonlight, casting the courtyard into an inky blackness. Amidst the pandemonium, Wraith and Pumpkin stood their ground, their eyes scanning the turbulent sky for any sign of who, or what, might be controlling this winged assault. The air crackled with an otherworldly energy, hinting that this was no ordinary bat migration, but something far more sinister and deliberate. Chapter 5: Secrets in the Pumpkin Patch. The chaos of the bat swarm slowly subsided, leaving Wraith and Pumpkin to catch their breath and gather their thoughts. As the last echoes of flapping wings faded into the night, they exchanged a determined look, their faces etched with a mixture of exhaustion and resolve. The air around them still buzzed with residual energy, a reminder of the supernatural forces at play in shadowed Hallow. "The pumpkin patch," Wraith said, her voice barely above a whisper, her spectral form shimmering in the moonlight. "We need to follow up on what we learned at the masquerade." Her eyes glowed with an otherworldly intensity, reflecting the urgency of their mission. Pumpkin nodded, his orange hair catching the moonlight and seeming to dance with an inner fire. "Good thinking," he replied, a hint of excitement creeping into his voice. "Those jack-o'-lanterns see everything that happens around here. If anyone knows what's going on, it'll be them." They made their way through the misty streets of shadowed Hallow, the eerie glow of the ever-present moon guiding their path. The town seemed to hold its breath as they passed, shadows elongating and twisting in their wake. As they approached the pumpkin patch, the air grew thick with the scent of earth and magic, a heady mixture that spoke of ancient powers and hidden secrets. Rows upon rows of pumpkins stretched out before them, each one bearing a unique, carved face. Some grinned mischievously, their jagged teeth glinting in the moonlight, while others wore expressions of surprise or contemplation, as if pondering the mysteries of the universe. As Wraith and Pumpkin stepped into the patch, the jack-o'-lantern stirred to life, their eyes flickering with an inner light that pulsed in rhythm with the magical energy permeating the air. Well, a gravelly voice chuckled from nearby, startling the duo. "What brings the town's finest detectives to our humble patch?" The words seemed to emanate from the very earth itself, rich with the wisdom of countless harvests. Wraith turned to face a particularly gnarly pumpkin with a crooked grin, its weathered surface speaking of years spent watching over the patch. "We're investigating some strange occurrences," she said, her ghostly voice carrying a note of urgency. "Have you noticed anything unusual lately?" Her eyes scanned the patch, searching for any sign of disturbance among the rows of gourds. The jack-o'-lanterns murmured among themselves, their voices a chorus of whispers and creaks that rose and fell like a spectral wind. The sound sent shivers down Pumpkin's spine, reminding him of the vast network of knowledge these sentient gourds possessed. "Lights," a small, high-pitched pumpkin piped up, its voice cutting through the cacophony. "We've seen strange lights at night, dancing at the far end of the patch." The tiny jack-o'-lantern's eyes darted nervously, as if afraid of being overheard by unseen forces. Pumpkin's ears perked up, his nose twitching as he caught an unfamiliar scent. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it set his supernatural senses on edge. "Something's off," he muttered, dropping to all fours as his form shimmered and shifted into that of a large, orange fox. His transformation was fluid and natural, his body elongating and sprouting fur in a matter of seconds. He padded through the rows of pumpkins, his nose to the ground, inhaling deeply with each step. The scent was elusive, a mixture of something ancient and something decidedly not of this world. Wraith followed close behind, her ethereal form gliding silently over the earth, leaving no footprints in the soft soil. The jack-o'-lanterns watched with curiosity as the pair made their way deeper into the patch, their glowing eyes tracking every movement. Suddenly, Pumpkin stopped, his tail bristling and his hackles rising. Before him sat a pumpkin that looked no different from the others, but his keen senses told him otherwise. There was something about it that felt wrong, out of place in the otherwise harmonious patch. He pawed at the ground around it, his claws scraping against something solid beneath the soil. The sound echoed unnaturally in the still night air. Wraith knelt beside him, her ghostly fingers probing the earth. With a soft click that seemed to reverberate through the entire patch, the bottom of the pumpkin swung open, revealing a dark space beneath. The air that wafted up from the opening was stale and carried the faint scent of decay. "A false bottom," Wraith mused, her voice tinged with excitement and a hint of trepidation. She exchanged a meaningful look with Pumpkin, both of them aware that they were on the brink of uncovering something significant. As they cleared away more dirt, their movements quick and purposeful, they uncovered a wooden trapdoor, its surface etched with arcane symbols that seemed to writhe and shift in the moonlight. Wraith ran her fingers over the markings, feeling the pulse of ancient magic beneath her touch. The symbols glowed faintly at her ethereal contact, responding to her supernatural essence. "Underground caverns," she whispered, meeting Pumpkin's amber eyes. The fox's gaze was intense, a mixture of curiosity and caution. "Ready to see where this leads?" Wraith's question hung in the air, laden with the weight of the unknown that lay before them. Wraith and Pumpkin exchanged a determined nod before lifting the trapdoor. It creaked open reluctantly, as if reluctant to reveal its secrets. A musty odor wafted up from the darkness below, carrying hints of damp earth and ancient magic. The scent was so potent that even Wraith, in her spectral form, could detect it. Wraith descended first, her ethereal form gliding effortlessly down the rough-hewn steps. Her ghostly light illuminated the passage, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Pumpkin followed, his fox form padding silently behind her, his keen senses alert for any sign of danger. As they ventured deeper into the cavern, the walls began to curve inward, mimicking the shape of their snow globe world. The realization sent a shiver through both of them, a stark reminder of their confined existence. The curved walls seemed to press in on them, amplifying the sense of claustrophobia that permeated the underground space. "Look," Pumpkin whispered, his voice echoing softly off the curved walls. His keen eyes had spotted something in the gloom ahead, a flicker of movement or a play of shadows that seemed out of place in the stillness of the cavern. They emerged into a wider chamber, where the remnants of a ritual site lay scattered about. Wraith's spectral glow illuminated unfamiliar magical symbols etched into the stone floor, their lines pulsing with a faint, sickly light that seemed to drain the warmth from the air around them. The symbols were intricate and alien, unlike anything they had encountered in their investigations. Wraith floated closer to examine the symbols, her brow furrowing in concentration. "I've never seen markings quite like these before," she murmured, her voice tinged with a mixture of fascination and unease. She traced the air above the symbols, careful not to touch them directly, sensing the potent and potentially dangerous magic they contained. Pumpkin sniffed at a collection of discarded vials and herbs nearby, his sensitive nose twitching as he processed the complex array of scents. "These scents, they're similar to what we found in Madame Hemlock's tower," he observed, his voice low and thoughtful. The familiar yet altered scents spoke of experimentation and the manipulation of known magical ingredients. Wraith nodded, her eyes widening as she recognized some of the ingredients. "These are used in potions for dimensional travel," she said, her voice tinged with concern and a growing sense of alarm. "Whoever was here, they were trying to break through the barrier of our world." The implications of such an attempt hung heavily in the air between them. As they searched the chamber, Pumpkin's paw caught on something hidden beneath a pile of debris. He carefully pulled it free, revealing a weathered piece of parchment, its edges crumbling with age. The fox's eyes gleamed with curiosity as he nudged it towards Wraith. "A map," Wraith breathed, examining the faded lines with growing excitement. Her spectral fingers hovered over the parchment, tracing the intricate details. "It's only partial, but look, these markings show locations along the edge of the globe." The map seemed to depict weak points in the barrier that surrounded their world, information that could be invaluable or incredibly dangerous in the wrong hands. Before they could study the map further, a low rumble shook the cavern, causing small pebbles to skitter across the floor. Dust and small rocks began to rain down from the ceiling as the tremor intensified, the curved walls amplifying the sound until it was deafening. The very foundations of their snow globe world seemed to be shaking. "We need to get out of here," Pumpkin yelled, his fox form already bounding towards the exit, weaving between falling debris with agile grace. His voice was barely audible over the growing cacophony of shifting earth and cracking stone. Wraith tucked the map into her ethereal form, the parchment seeming to meld with her spectral essence, and followed Pumpkin's lead. She dodged falling debris as they raced back through the twisting passages, her ghostly nature allowing her to phase through smaller obstacles. The rumbling grew louder with each passing second, and larger chunks of rock crashed down around them, threatening to cut off their escape. Just as they neared the entrance, a massive tremor rocked the cavern, more violent than any before. The ceiling above them groaned ominously, the sound reverberating through the curved passageway. With a deafening crack that seemed to split the very air, it began to collapse. Massive boulders and showers of dirt plummeted towards them, threatening to seal them in the depths of the earth forever. Chapter 6: Edges of Reality. As the cavern collapsed around them, a sudden flurry of wings and high-pitched squeaks filled the air. A cauldron of bats swooped in, their echolocation creating a living map of the safest path through the falling debris. Wraith and Pumpkin followed the bats' lead, ducking and weaving through the chaos until they emerged into a previously undiscovered section of the caverns. The bats' leathery wings brushed against their faces as they navigated the treacherous passage, their tiny bodies forming a protective shield against the worst of the falling rocks. Catching their breath, they found themselves in a vast network of tunnels that seemed to curve along the very edge of their world. The walls here were smooth and glassy, occasionally transparent enough to reveal glimpses of the swirling black and orange sparkles that filled their snow globe universe. The air was thick with an otherworldly energy, and strange echoes reverberated through the winding passages, as if the very fabric of reality was whispering ancient secrets. As they explored, Wraith and Pumpkin discovered multiple sites where the barrier had been tested. Scorch marks, crystallized magic residue, and abandoned tools littered these areas, each telling a story of failed attempts to break through. They examined the remnants of magical experiments gone awry, noting the scent of ozone and burnt ectoplasm that lingered in the air. "Look at this," Pumpkin called, his voice echoing off the curved walls. He had discovered a section where the rock face had been worn smooth, revealing an ancient mural beneath layers of sediment. His feline eyes glowed with excitement in the dim light, his tail twitching with anticipation. Wraith floated closer, her spectral glow illuminating the intricate artwork. The mural depicted a cosmic scene, powerful beings crafting a snow globe from pure magic, filling it with the essence of Halloween. At the center stood a familiar skyline, shadowed hollow in its infancy. The colors were vivid and otherworldly, seeming to shift and dance as they gazed upon them. This must be the creation of our world, Wraith whispered, her ghostly fingers tracing the painted figures. She could almost feel the residual magic pulsing through the ancient artwork, connecting her to the very genesis of their realm. As they studied the mural, Pumpkin's keen eyes spotted a series of symbols along its base. These look like some kind of code, he mused, his tail swishing thoughtfully. The cat detective's whiskers twitched as he focused on the intricate patterns, his mind already working to decipher their meaning. Together, they worked to decipher the cryptic message, combining Wraith's knowledge of arcane lore with Pumpkin's sharp intellect. As the last symbol fell into place, realization dawned on their faces, a mixture of excitement and trepidation washing over them. The hidden archives beneath Hemlock Academy, Wraith breathed, her spectral form shimmering with anticipation. That's where we need to go next. The ghost detective's voice held a note of urgency, knowing that time was of the essence. Guided by their newfound knowledge, they made their way back to the surface and slipped into Hemlock Academy under cover of eternal twilight. The school's Gothic architecture loomed above them, its spires reaching towards the ever-present full moon. Deep beneath the school's foundations, they discovered a vast library, its shelves groaning under the weight of ancient tomes and forbidden knowledge. The air was thick with dust and the scent of aged parchment, and magical wards shimmered faintly around particularly dangerous volumes. As they searched the dusty archives, a particular scroll caught Wraith's eye. Its parchment seemed to glow faintly, as if imbued with its own inner light. Unrolling it carefully, they found themselves face to face with a prophecy, its words glowing faintly in the dim light. When the barriers between realms grow thin, and holiday spirits seek to blend, the merging of worlds shall begin, bringing both peril and potential without end. The words seemed to hover in the air, resonating with a power that sent shivers through both detectives. They exchanged worried glances, knowing that this prophecy held the key to understanding the strange events unfolding in shadowed Hallow. As Wraith and Pumpkin pored over the prophecy, another tremor shook the archives, stronger than any before. Dust rained from the ceiling, and books tumbled from their shelves, their pages fluttering like startled birds. The very foundations of the academy seemed to groan under the strain. These aren't random, Wraith realized, her spectral form flickering with concern. They're systematic attacks on the barrier. Her voice was tight with worry, understanding the implications of such coordinated assaults on their world's defenses. Pumpkin nodded grimly, his fur standing on end. Someone's trying to weaken our world's defenses. His claws extended involuntarily, ready to face whatever threat might emerge. Their search grew more frantic, knowing that time was running out. Amid the chaos of fallen tomes, Pumpkin's nose twitched, catching a scent that was out of place in the musty archives. He pawed at a section of the floor, revealing a hidden compartment cleverly concealed beneath an ornate rug. Madame Hemlock's secret research, he exclaimed, pulling out a leather-bound journal. The book thrummed with magical energy, its pages crisp with recent use. They flipped through the pages, filled with complex diagrams and notes on snow globe dynamics. Hemlock had been studying the very fabric of their reality, searching for ways to strengthen the barrier. Her meticulous observations and brilliant theories filled page after page, offering insights into the nature of their world that neither detective had ever imagined. A cackle echoed through the archives, sending a chill through both Wraith and Pumpkin. Well, what have we here? The voice dripped with malice and dark amusement. A hooded figure stepped from the shadows, eyes gleaming with malevolent purpose. The brooch on their cloak marked them as a member of the Twilight cult, its twisted design a perversion of Shadowed Hollow's protective magic. Hand over those notes, the cultist demanded, dark energy crackling at their fingertips. The air around them seemed to warp and twist, reality itself bending to their will. Wraith and Pumpkin exchanged a quick glance, a silent plan forming between them. Without hesitation, they bolted, the cultist in hot pursuit. They raced through twisting corridors, magical bolts sizzling past them, leaving scorch marks on the ancient stone walls. The chase led them back to the caverns, their feet and paws pounding against the uneven ground. As they ran, they witnessed a horrifying sight that made them skid to a halt. A group of cultists stood before a shimmering section of the barrier, channeling dark magic into its surface. Their chants echoed through the cavern, a discordant melody that set Wraith and Pumpkin's teeth on edge. The air crackled with energy as the barrier began to warp and twist, its usually smooth surface becoming distorted and unstable. For a moment, it seemed as if it might shatter entirely, the very fabric of their world hanging by a thread. Then, with a thunderous crack that shook the entire cavern, the magic backfired. The cultists were thrown back, their bodies smoking from the magical backlash, and a localized distortion rippled through the cavern like a stone dropped in a pond. Reality itself seemed to bend and warp around them, colors shifting and blending in impossible ways. Wraith and Pumpkin barely managed to dodge falling rocks as the cavern began to collapse, the failed ritual having weakened the very structure of the cave system. A familiar sound filled the air, the frantic beating of bat wings. The bats swirled around them once more, their echolocation guiding the detectives through the chaos. Wraith and Pumpkin followed their winged guides, trusting in the creatures that had saved them before. Chapter 7, Race Against Time. As the dust settled in the collapsing cavern, Wraith and Pumpkin emerged, battered but alive. They knew they had to act fast, their hearts racing with the urgency of their discovery. With the ancient pumpkin tome clutched tightly and Madame Hemlock's meticulous research in hand, they sprinted towards Town Hall, their footsteps echoing through the twilight-bathed streets of shadowed Hallow. Mayor Cornelius Crypt paced nervously in the council chamber, his bones rattling with each anxious step. The wooden floorboards creaked beneath his feet, adding to the tense atmosphere. The detectives burst in, causing the assembled council members to jump in surprise, their supernatural forms flickering and shifting in alarm. "We've uncovered something big," Wraith announced, her spectral form flickering with urgency, her voice carrying a weight that immediately silenced the room. Pumpkin nodded, his orange fur standing on end as he added, "The tremors, Madame Hemlock's disappearance, it's all connected. We're facing a threat unlike anything Shadowed Hallow has seen before." They laid out their findings, carefully explaining the Twilight cult's nefarious plans and the weakening barrier that protected their realm. The council listened in stunned silence as the gravity of the situation sank in, their faces a mix of disbelief and growing dread. "The exchange program," Mayor Crypt muttered, his skeletal fingers tapping anxiously on the polished oak table. "It's not just a cultural event, is it? We've unwittingly played into their hands." Wraith shook her head, her ethereal form pulsing with concern. "It coincides with a prophesied alignment of realms. The cult is trying to use this cosmic event to shatter our world's defenses, to tear apart the very fabric of Shadowed Hallow." Pumpkin's fur bristled as he added, his voice low and serious, "And we believe they're holding Madame Hemlock somewhere crucial to the globe's structure. Her power could be the key to their entire plan." The council erupted into worried chatter, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of fear and speculation. But Wraith cut through the noise, her determined voice silencing the room once more. "We need to act now. Every second counts. We'll split up and investigate key locations throughout Shadowed Hallow." "I'll take Whisper Stream," Wraith volunteered, her form already shifting in anticipation of the search. Pumpkin nodded, his eyes glowing with resolve. "I'll check out Misty Marsh. If there are any traces of dark magic, my nose will find them." Mayor Crypt stood, his bones creaking as he drew himself up to his full height. "I'll organize a search party for Tomb Town. We'll leave no gravestone unturned. Be careful, both of you. The fate of our world rests in your hands." As twilight fell over Shadowed Hallow, casting long shadows across the landscape, Wraith glided silently along Whisper Stream. The water's surface rippled with an otherworldly glow, reflecting the eerie light of the ever-present moon that hung low in the sky. She paused, her spectral senses tingling as she heard hushed voices ahead. Concealing herself in the mist that clung to the riverbank, Wraith drifted closer, her form nearly invisible in the gathering gloom. Two hooded figures stood by the water's edge, their voices low but urgent, carried to her on the gentle breeze. The alignment is nearly upon us, one hissed, their voice filled with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. We must complete the ritual before the moon reaches its zenith. Our window of opportunity grows smaller with each passing moment. The other nodded, their cowled head bobbing in agreement. And the witch? Is she secure? We cannot afford any interference at this critical juncture. Yes, the old crone won't interfere. Her power will fuel our spell, breaking this cursed snow globe once and for all. Shadowed Hollow's time has come to an end. Wraith's form flickered with anger and concern, her ethereal essence pulsing with the need to act. She had to warn Pumpkin and the others before it was too late. The cult's plans were further along than they had feared, and time was running out for all of Shadowed Hollow. Meanwhile, in the depths of Misty Marsh, Pumpkin's nose twitched as he caught a faint magical trail. The scent was familiar, the same strange, acrid magic they detected in Madame Hemlock's tower. His claws sank into the soft, spongy earth as he followed the trail, weaving through gnarled trees with bark that seemed to whisper and phosphorescent fungi that pulsed with an otherworldly light. The trail led him to a hidden grotto, concealed behind a shimmering curtain of glowing moss. Pumpkin's eyes widened as he peered inside, his feline pupils dilating to take in every detail of the scene before him. Cultists moved about a makeshift altar, their dark robes rustling as they prepared for some sinister ritual. Candles flickered, casting dancing shadows on the damp cave walls. And there, in the center of it all, was a map of Shadowed Hollow unlike any he'd seen before. It showed the town as it truly was, a snow globe realm suspended in a void between worlds. Weak points were marked along its curved edges, pulsing with a malevolent energy that made Pumpkin's fur stand on end. Pumpkin knew he'd stumbled upon the cult's main hideout, the center of their nefarious plans. He had to get this information back to Wraith and the others before it was too late. The very existence of their world hung in the balance, and every second counted. Wraith and Pumpkin raced through the misty streets of Shadowed Hollow, their paths converging at the gates of Tomb Town. The graveyard's wrought iron fence creaked ominously as they pushed through, the sound echoing through the still air. They reunited in front of a weathered mausoleum, its stone facade etched with arcane symbols that seemed to shift in the moonlight. "Did you find anything?" Pumpkin asked, his fur still damp from the marsh, clinging to his lithe form. Wraith nodded, her spectral form shimmering with urgency, tendrils of ectoplasm swirling around her. "The cultists are planning to use Madame Hemlock's power for their ritual. They're running out of time, which means we are too." Pumpkin's eyes widened, his tail twitching nervously. "I found their hideout in Misty Marsh. They have a map showing weak points in our world's barrier. It's worse than we thought, they know exactly where to strike." As they exchanged information, Mayor Crypt emerged from behind a nearby tombstone, his bones rattling with excitement. Leaves crunched beneath his bony feet as he approached. "I may have something," he said, producing an old scroll from within his rib cage. "We found this hidden in one of the crypts. It's been there for centuries, waiting for this moment." The detectives huddled around the scroll, their faces illuminated by its faint magical glow as they deciphered its cryptic symbols. Suddenly, the air around them shimmered, reality itself seeming to bend. A translucent image of Madame Hemlock appeared, her familiar face etched with concern. "My dears," her voice echoed, as if coming from a great distance, "the ritual's true location is where time bends and reality twists. Look to where the hands never truly align. The fate of Shadowed Hollow rests in your hands." The image faded, leaving them in stunned silence. Pumpkin's tail twitched as realization dawned, his eyes widening. The crooked spire. Of course, it's been right under our noses this whole time. No sooner had the words left his mouth than a deafening crack of thunder split the air, shaking the very ground beneath their feet. They looked up to see storm clouds gathering within the confines of their snow globe world, swirling in impossible patterns that defied the laws of nature. "We need to hurry," Wraith urged, her voice carrying a note of desperation as she was already moving towards the cemetery gates. "Every moment we delay brings Shadowed Hollow closer to destruction." As they raced back towards the town center, the unnatural storm intensified, the wind howling through the twisted streets. Lightning arced between clouds, illuminating the curved edges of their realm in brief, terrifying flashes. The wind carried whispers of ancient incantations, words of power that made the air itself tremble. Suddenly, a massive cauldron of bats erupted from every shadow and crevice in shadowed Hallow. The creatures swarmed overhead, their wings beating in perfect unison, creating a sound like rolling thunder. To the detective's amazement, the bats began forming a living pathway in the air, their bodies intertwining to create a solid, undulating bridge that led directly to the crooked spire. "I think we're meant to follow them," Pumpkin shouted over the wind, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and determination. "It's as if shadowed Hallow itself is trying to help us." Wraith nodded, her ghostly form already rising to join the bat-made path, her essence merging with the living bridge. "Let's go. Madam Hemlock and all of Shadowed Hallow are counting on us. We're their last hope." Chapter 8, The Witching Hour. Wraith and Pumpkin raced along the undulating path of bats, their hearts pounding with urgency. The twisted trees of Shadowed Hallow blurred past them, their gnarled branches reaching out like spectral fingers in the perpetual twilight. As they approached the crooked spire, its impossibly tall form looming before them, they encountered an unexpected obstacle, a shimmering magical barrier encasing the entire structure, its surface rippling with arcane symbols and pulsing with an eerie, otherworldly light. "Blast!" Pumpkin growled, his fur bristling with frustration, hackles raised and tail lashing from side to side. "We need to break through, fast. Who knows what those cultists are doing to Madam Hemlock in there?" Wraith's spectral form flickered with determination, her ethereal essence pulsing with a fierce, otherworldly glow. "Together, Pumpkin. Your strength, my phasing ability, we can do this. Focus your energy on the weak points I create." They combined their unique talents, Wraith's ethereal energy merging with Pumpkin's raw power in a dazzling display of supernatural teamwork. The barrier crackled and sparked as they pushed against it, bolts of magical energy arcing across its surface. Slowly, inexorably, it began to give way under their relentless assault, fractures spreading like a web across its shimmering expanse. As the magical shield shattered with a sound like 1,000 crystal glasses breaking at once, cultists poured out of the tower's entrance, their faces hidden behind grotesque masks that twisted and shifted in the flickering light. Wraith and Pumpkin fought side by side, dodging spells that crackled with dark energy and countering with their own abilities. Pumpkin's claws slashed through the air, leaving trails of orange energy that hung in the air like burning claw marks, while Wraith's ghostly form darted between attackers, passing through solid matter and causing confusion and chaos in her wake. With the path cleared, littered with the unconscious forms of defeated cultists, they entered the crooked spire. The interior was a nightmare of twisted architecture and magical traps. Each floor presented a new challenge, shifting staircases that rearranged themselves at will, rooms that defied gravity with floors becoming ceilings and vice versa, and illusions that threatened to trap them in endless loops of corridors that led nowhere. Wraith's ability to see through deceptions proved invaluable as they navigated the tower's treacherous interior, her spectral senses cutting through the layers of magical misdirection. "Look out!" Pumpkin yelled, his feline reflexes kicking in as he tackled Wraith. A bolt of dark energy sizzled past them, so close they could feel its malevolent heat. They rolled to their feet in perfect synchronization, facing a group of cultists guarding an ornate door adorned with eldritch symbols and pulsing with an ominous energy. "Madam Hemlock must be behind there," Wraith whispered, her voice echoing with an otherworldly resonance. "Ready for one last push? We've come too far to fail now." Pumpkin nodded, his eyes glowing with determination, a low growl rumbling in his chest. They charged forward, magic and fur flying as they broke through the final line of defense. Pumpkin's claws tore through magical barriers while Wraith's spectral form disrupted the cultists' concentration, causing their spells to backfire in spectacular fashion. The door burst open with a thunderous crash, revealing a sight that made their blood run cold. Madame Hemlock lay suspended in midair, her silver hair flowing around her as if underwater, trapped in a magical slumber that seemed to drain the very life from her. Around her, a complex ritual circle pulsed with dark energy, its symbols twisting and writhing on the floor like living things, each one an abomination against the natural order of magic. Standing at the center of it all was a figure they recognized, the disillusioned former mascot of a rival holiday realm, his once cheerful visage now twisted with bitterness and dark power. His eyes glowed with an unholy light, and tendrils of shadow writhed around him like living darkness. "You're too late," he sneered, his voice a mockery of its former jolly tone. He raised his hands, crackling with malevolent energy, as the tower's clock began to chime an impossible hour. The entire snow globe world shook violently, reality itself seeming to warp and bend around them. Outside, through the tower's warped windows, they could see the very fabric of shadowed Hallow beginning to unravel. The crooked spire's clock began to chime, each toll resonating with an otherworldly frequency that shook shadowed Hallow to its core. The very fabric of their snow globe realm trembled, reality bending and warping around them like a funhouse mirror gone mad. The air itself seemed to ripple, distorting vision and making it difficult to focus on any one thing for too long. Wraith and Pumpkin sprang into action, their movements a blur as they unleashed a barrage of spectral energy and pumpkin-fueled magic against the cult leader. Wraith's form flickered and pulsed, sending out waves of ghostly power that disrupted the dark ritual's energies. Pumpkin, his fur standing on end and crackling with magical electricity, hurled blasts of orange energy that exploded like miniature supernovas upon impact. The cult leader retaliated with dark, twisted spells that crackled through the air, leaving scorch marks on the tower walls and filling the room with the acrid smell of brimstone. Shadows coalesced into razor-sharp tendrils that lashed out at the heroic duo, forcing them to dodge and weave in a deadly dance. As the battle raged, the snow globe's instability increased exponentially. Outside, visible through the tower's warped windows, trees uprooted themselves, floating in midair like weightless toys. The whisper stream reversed its flow, its inky waters defying gravity and flowing upwards in a cascading waterfall of darkness. Buildings twisted into impossible shapes, their architecture becoming a nightmare of non-Euclidean geometry that hurt the eyes to look upon. "Pumpkin, keep them busy," Wraith called out, her voice echoing with an otherworldly timbre as she dodged a blast of dark energy that left a smoking crater in the floor. "I'm going in after Madame Hemlock. We need her knowledge to stop this madness." Pumpkin nodded, his eyes blazing with determination as he faced down the cultists who had regrouped behind their leader. He became a whirlwind of slashing claws and magical blasts, holding the line against their attackers with a ferocity that belied his usually laid-back demeanor. His fur glowed with an inner light, each movement leaving trails of orange energy in the air like fireworks. Wraith focused her ethereal energy, concentrating until her form began to shimmer and fade. With a final push, she slipped into the spirit realm, a dimension of swirling mists and whispered secrets that overlapped with the physical world. Here, the chaos of the collapsing snow globe appeared as a shimmering tapestry of magical threads, each one vibrating with discordant energy. Madame Hemlock's consciousness was visible as a dim, flickering light, trapped within a cocoon of dark magic. Wraith reached out, her spectral form intertwining with Hemlock's essence. It was like trying to grasp smoke, but Wraith persevered, her determination lending her strength in this realm of pure will and emotion. "Madam, wake up. We need you." Wraith's voice echoed through the spirit plane, reverberating with the power of her intent. "Shadowed Hallow is falling apart, and you're the only one who can help us set it right." Slowly, agonizingly, Madame Hemlock's eyes fluttered open, awareness returning to her wizened face like the dawn breaking through storm clouds. She gasped, taking in the chaos around them, her magical senses immediately attuned to the dire situation. "The ritual, we must stop it." Hemlock's voice cracked with urgency, her usual composure shattered by the gravity of the situation. "It's unraveling the very fabric of our realm." They rejoined the physical world in a flash of spectral light, materializing just as Pumpkin sent the last cultist flying with a well-placed magical blast. The feline protector was battered and singed, but his eyes still burned with fierce determination. The three united, forming a triangle around the ritual's circle, channeling their combined magical might against the cult leader's dark machinations. Light and shadow clashed in a spectacular display of arcane power, the very air seeming to tear as their energies collided. Wraith's spectral essence, Pumpkin's primal magic, and Madame Hemlock's centuries of arcane knowledge merged into a force of nature that pushed back against the encroaching chaos. With a final, monumental push that drew upon the last reserves of their strength, they shattered the ritual's circle, its malevolent energy dissipating in a burst of multicolored sparks that rained down around them like a cascade of broken dreams. The cult leader, his grandiose plans lying in ruins at his feet, snarled with unbridled rage. His eyes blazed with a manic light that spoke of a mind teetering on the edge of sanity, pushed too far by his lust for power and revenge. He raised his hands, dark energy crackling between his fingers like black lightning, the very air around him warping with the intensity of his hatred. "If I can't have this world, no one will," he screamed, his voice distorted by the magical energies surging through him. With a gesture of cosmic spite, he unleashed a blast of chaotic magic directly at the tower's clock face, the symbolic heart of Shadowed Hollow's tenuous reality. The spell struck with devastating force, its impact resonating through the very foundations of their world. Glass shattered into a million glittering shards, each one reflecting the madness unfolding around them. Gears exploded outward in a deadly shrapnel of brass and steel, narrowly missing the defenders as they dove for cover. The very structure of the crooked spire groaned in protest, timbers creaking and stone cracking under the assault. As the dust settled, they saw that the tower's face had crumbled away entirely, leaving a gaping wound in the building. Through this breach, they could see beyond the confines of their snow globe realm for the first time, a terrifying vista of swirling mists and half-formed realities, the liminal space between worlds that threatened to pour into Shadowed Hollow and dissolve it into nothingness. Wraith, Pumpkin, and Madame Hemlock stumbled as the floor beneath them lurched, the tower swaying like a tree in a storm. Debris rained down around them, and the air filled with the keening wail of reality itself crying out in pain. Through the shattered opening, tendrils of mist from the space between realms began to creep in, bringing with them a bone-deep chill that spoke of oblivion. "Quickly!" Madame Hemlock shouted over the cacophony of destruction, her voice carrying the weight of command despite the dire circumstances. "Join hands with me. We must stabilize the barrier before all is lost." Without hesitation, Wraith and Pumpkin moved to Hemlock's side, linking hands to form an unbroken circle. Power surged between them, a harmonious blend of spectral energy, primal magic, and ancient wisdom that hummed with the potential to reshape reality itself. Madame Hemlock began to chant, her words weaving a spell of protection and renewal that drew upon the very essence of Shadowed Hollow and its inhabitants. Wraith's ethereal form pulsed with an inner light that grew in intensity until it was almost blinding, spreading outward to encompass the tower in a protective cocoon. Pumpkin's magic manifested as tendrils of vibrant orange energy, reminiscent of autumn leaves caught in a whirlwind, intertwining with Wraith's glow to form a lattice of power. At the center, Madame Hemlock stood tall, her eyes glowing with eldritch knowledge as she directed their combined power. Her own magic, a deep, royal purple shot through with silver sparks, bridged the gap between her companion's abilities, weaving them into a tapestry of restorative energy. The cult leader, realizing that the tide had turned against him, made a desperate lunge towards the broken clock face. His eyes were wild with the madness of one who has lost everything, seeking only to drag his enemies down with him into the abyss. But Pumpkin, without breaking the magical connection, lashed out with a tendril of energy that wrapped around the villain's ankle like a glowing lasso, yanking him back from the brink with a startled yelp. As their spell took hold, its power radiating outward in concentric waves of multicolored light, the snow globe's violent tremors began to subside. The swirling mists beyond the barrier receded, pushed back by the combined will of Shadowed Hollow's defenders and the latent magic of the realm itself rising up to protect its home. Slowly, painstakingly, the tower's structure began to knit itself back together. Clock gears floated through the air, clicking into place with a satisfying series of chimes. Shards of glass rose from the floor, reforming into a solid face that gleamed in the ethereal light of their magic. Outside, visible through the newly restored windows of the crooked spire, the cauldron of bats that had been flying in chaotic patterns began to settle. Their erratic movements smoothed out, forming graceful spirals around the tower like a living tornado of wings and fur. As the last tremors faded and the tower stood whole once more, proud and defiant against the twilight sky, the bat's flight returned to its normal, predictable patterns, a clear sign that the natural order of Shadowed Hollow's magic had been restored. The three defenders lowered their hands, exhausted but triumphant. Madame Hemlock turned to face the defeated cult leader, her eyes filled with a mixture of pity and stern judgment. "Your bitterness has nearly destroyed us all," she said, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. "It's time to face the consequences of your actions." As if in response to her words, shadows began to coalesce around the fallen villain, taking the form of spectral chains that bound him tight. The very magic of Shadowed Hallow, it seemed, had passed its own sentence. Epilogue: New Horizons. In the days following the near catastrophe, Shadowed Hallow buzzed with activity as its residents worked tirelessly to repair the damage. The crooked spire, once a symbol of stability, now stood as a testament to their resilience. Scaffolding crisscrossed its facade, and the sound of hammering echoed through the perpetual twilight. Mayor Cornelius Crypt called a town meeting in Cobweb Square, his bony fingers tapping nervously on the podium as he addressed the crowd. "Citizens of Shadowed Hallow, we owe our continued existence to the bravery of Wraith Shadowmist and Pumpkin Spice," he announced, his voice carrying a hint of pride beneath its usual quaver. Wraith and Pumpkin stepped forward, met with thunderous applause and the rattling of skeleton hands. Even the most stoic vampires nodded in approval, fangs glinting in the moonlight. Madame Hemlock took the stage next, her silver hair gleaming as she raised her hands for silence. "My dear friends," she began, her voice rich with wisdom, "it's time you understood the true nature of our home." She wove a tale of magic and cosmic forces, explaining how Shadowed Hallow existed within a mystical snow globe, a self-contained pocket dimension connected to other holiday realms. The crowd listened in rapt attention, gasping and murmuring as they learned of their world's delicate balance. "And now," Madame Hemlock continued, "we must move forward. The exchange program with Merry Hallow will proceed, but with enhanced protections." Mayor Crypt nodded vigorously, his skull nearly detaching. "Indeed. And who better to represent us than our very own heroes?" Wraith and Pumpkin exchanged glances, then stepped forward. "We volunteer," they said in unison, their voices blending spectral whisper and gravelly growl. As preparations for their departure began, a shimmering portal appeared at the edge of town, stabilized by the recovered Pumpkin Tome's ancient magic. It pulsed with an otherworldly light, offering glimpses of a realm filled with twinkling lights and cheerful music. Shadowed Hollow's residents gathered to bid farewell to their representatives. Jack-o'-lanterns grinned from every corner, their flames flickering with excitement. Widow webs wove a special silk cloak for each traveler, imbued with protective enchantments. Above them all, a spectacular cauldron of bats swirled in intricate patterns, their wings catching the moonlight in a dazzling aerial display. As Wraith and Pumpkin approached the portal, a small group of bats broke away from the main swarm, fluttering down to perch on their shoulders. "Your magical messengers," Madame Hemlock explained with a wink. "To keep us connected across the realms." As Wraith and Pumpkin stepped through the portal, the familiar twilight of Shadowed Hallow faded behind them. They emerged into a dazzling world of twinkling lights and cheerful melodies. Merry Hallow stretched before them, a winter wonderland of gingerbread houses and candy cane lampposts. The contrast was jarring. Pumpkin sneezed as a snowflake landed on his nose, his orange fur standing out starkly against the pristine white landscape. Wraith's ethereal form shimmered, adapting to the new magical atmosphere. "Well, this is different," Wraith observed, her voice a cool whisper amidst the jingling bells. Pumpkin's ears twitched. "I smell cinnamon. And, is that hot chocolate?" Also by Wynn Valentine. Merry Hallow Mystery Series. Yuletide spirits. Frostbite frights. Sugarplum sabotage. Tinsel and treachery. Mistletoe madness. Tinsel, treats, and trouble, a Merry Hallow Omnibus Books 1-5. Candy cane conspiracy. Holly jolly blarney. Shadowed Hallow Mystery Series. Bats over Hallows Eve. The Phantom Masquerade. Stand-alone Christmas romance books. Snowflakes and love. Snowflakes and second chances. Snow globe soulmates. Bookshop love, a Harbor Cove holiday romance. Paranormal spicy romance books. Echoes from the Deep, a paranormal kraken romance. Serpentine Love, a paranormal gorgon romance. Kindle Vella series. Mysteries of Hallowville, a Halloween cozy mystery series.